Kimball Crossley, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience today?
Well, I'm Kimball Crossley. I'm a former baseball writer, but I've been a baseball scout for the past, 20-some years, 26 years. I currently scout for the San Diego Padres, have for the last 6 years, I think. And yeah, that's, I was a fantasy baseball player when I was getting out of college. I was originally into sabermetrics of baseball, Bill James and all that when I was a young kid. And it kind of helped me learn about the game and helped me get into baseball, get into scouting.
And so what were all the different teams that you have scouted for?
Well, the last few years I've had the Astros, the Marlins, and the Nationals. I worked for the Blue Jays for a while, and I had West Coast teams, AL West, NL West, their AAA teams. I had the Nationals, Marlins, and Astros farm systems, not just their major league teams. Several years ago, I had the Giants farm system and their complete organization for a while. There's been years where I've had the Red Sox, I've had the Mets. I mean, I'd have to think of a few teams that I've never really had, but over the years, I've seen just about everybody.
Oh, man. And of course, you coach basketball as well, which we do share about every so often as we both have teams. How are they doing?
Well, so I coach two teams, basically. I'm doing double duty, which is kind of frustrating, but I live in Rhode Island, and the Barrington, Rhode Island high school team is the team I coach for, and I'm an assistant coach for the varsity, and then I coach the middle school. And both teams are doing well and have done well. Last year, the varsity went to the state semifinals, and this year, despite only having one senior, they're 13-4, and again, one of the best teams in the state. So it's been really good. I really like.
That's fantastic.
And my head coach is a big sports fan and big baseball fan, so that's fun too.
Beautiful. So what we're going to do today, everyone, is I've gotten questions via the Google form that I put out here. I'm going to be throwing them to Kimball. I'll have some on my own as well. And also watching right now in chat, just leave your questions here. I can see everything that chat is saying. So please, if you have something you want to ask Kimball Crossley, just throw it at any point, and I hopefully will weave it into our conversation. But this is really for everybody to just get a sense of what it's like to be a scout. There's no one better than Kimball Crossley. Kimball, I remember you approached me in 2019, and we had a conversation after I introduced the CSW a bit, and it was fascinating. I gotta say, it was just so much fun. Remember, it was like 2 hours long of just like hanging out and talking about this stuff. And you're like, who are you? I've never heard this before. What is this? And you had all these fascinating questions and stuff. And it's been really fantastic talking about the sport with you for the last, I guess, wow, it's getting closer to 6 years now. Kimball.
Likewise.
Where does the time go? So our first question is from PL staffer Jack Muller, who says, what were some of the biggest barriers and roadblocks that you have faced into getting into scouting in general as a profession? How did you navigate them?
Well, that's it. That's a really good question. How can I see these chat questions? Can I not see them?
It's inside of a different place in Playback, but these are questions I prepared via our
cool. Form. No, I just always wondered. So, it was tough because I grew up in New York City and was not a baseball player. I was a basketball player growing up, and I barely played any baseball at any level. And but I always loved the game. I was a diehard Mets fan, and I think covering the Mets, watching the Mets really helped me learn about the game, especially when Davey Johnson came up as the manager and they started using analytics. So I was always fascinated by baseball. But to answer your question, to be an outsider can make it really tough because so many scouts are former players and coaches and those type of people. And, I got into it because I was a writer covering minor league baseball, and I had to do that. I did that for about 10 years, and it took me about 5 years from when I started trying to get a job in baseball until I finally landed a job. The good news is the game has opened up. I mean, at that time, I would approach general managers and coaches and managers and ask them questions about analytics, and they were just like, whoa, whatever. They didn't even know. I'm talking about like the 80s and 90s. About really the value of on-base percentage, or forget CSW or WHIP or anything like that, or induced vertical break. And so, but now I think because the game has evolved, more and more guys like me have gotten into the game. There's actually a lot of writers and pundits and people that have analyzed the game that have earned the respect of major league front offices and gotten jobs. That said, if you're trying to get a job in baseball, my advice to people is always get near the game. I was able to do it as a writer covering AAA baseball, covering the Pawtucket Red Sox, but other people can do it by doing an internship, by even just working in a minor league park. When you work in a minor league park, it's so casual. You'll end up talking to the manager. You'll end up talking to coaches, players. They're looking for something to do 3 hours before the game. They're bored, and you'll get to learn from them, and they hopefully can see that you know something. And so, however you get around the game, get around the game. If you want to break in, make those real contacts. Have people become impressed by you, learn from them, and that's the best way to do it.
All right, fantastic stuff. We actually have a question from chat already.
All right.
It's from Taka Rover, who asks, "What's the greatest player discovery you have ever had, if you've had one?" And what they mean is really a player that wasn't super well known. You scouted them, and you pounded the table for this player, and they turned out to be pretty good.
Well, so it's funny because when you're a pro scout, there's very few secrets out there. It's like I was just at a basketball game at Bishop Hendricken where Michael King played, and I was involved in us trading for Michael King when he was with the Yankees. But hello, people knew about Michael King. It wasn't like, oh, well, Kimball Crossley says this guy's really good. No, I was just one of the voices of many over the years because he's been scouted since he was probably 14. But I guess the biggest one was when I was with the Blue Jays, and it was kind of, sometimes it takes luck for this to happen. I got a call one night, and it doesn't usually happen this way. Trades are not usually like quick, and it's usually a process. And this was after Shea Hillenbrand had an altercation with the Blue Jays manager at the time. And they're like, we got to get rid of Shea, and the Giants have interest. And we got a list of your guys covering the Giants from you covering, who do you like here? What do you ever? And so I said, well, I kind of like Jeremy Accardo, this reliever that really was kind of undrafted. So that, made him sort of a lesser known guy. But I think he could be a good late inning reliever. I think he might even be able to close. And so it's like, okay. And we quickly did the deal. It happened that day. The next day, we got Accardo. And then that's where luck comes in. At the time, if my memory serves me, I've been in this a long time. BJ Ryan was our closer, one of the highest paid closers, if not the highest paid in the game. He blew out his elbow. Accardo stepped up, ended up saving games for that year and the next year, and was a great success story. But I also know it was like a lot had to go right. It wasn't like,
yeah, of course.
I saw all that coming down the pipe. More often you'll bang the table on a guy and nothing will happen.
Sure, yeah, right.
And you kind of play that game as a scout. You end up realizing, look, I'm competing against myself. I'm trying to be right. 95% of the time, the information I have out there doesn't get it's seen but not used because trades and other things like that don't happen all the time.
Sure. We have a great question from Brian Wolf, who's submitted inside the Google form. He asks, what are the easiest and most difficult tools to develop in a hitter? That is like plate discipline, approach, contact power, etc.
Well, that's a good question. That's funny because that's one of the questions I used to ask all the time, being a guy that was into sabermetrics. And my dad used to say, like, what is so important about walks? And I would I was always banging the drum for walks and guys that had a good on base percentage. And back before it was not a stat that you saw all the time. I mean, it wasn't on the scoreboard. It wasn't anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I would ask, I remember talking to Sandy Alderson, I believe, when I ran into him and early in my career, when I was writing perhaps, and I was sitting next to him in a game just kind of randomly. And I started asking about on base percentage. And at the time, I think I knew they appreciated it. And I was developing the theory. I must have been either covering baseball or scouting at that time, where it's not so easy. It's not like just take more pitches, draw more walks. It's a tough skill to acquire. I mean, some of it is just God-given with your eyesight, but so much is your swing, your approach, your setup, your timing. and how you try and like manipulate the ball, whether you hit it deep. And there's so many factors that the skills you talk about as a hitter are hard to learn. I mean, it's just like so much is just strength and already natural ability and being able to see the ball. But I think there's something that can be, and Sandy kind of, we went back and forth that he got a little angry at me because I was trying to like find out, if it's really true. And I was a little skeptical, and he was like, it can. It's like, okay. But I think when you change your approach and you try and hit the ball deep and you use the other field, that just gives you more time, lets you see the ball. As Saris likes to say, you let it travel. And I think that's a skill that can help and change a lot of hitters. But a lot of hitters kind of are who they are, especially when they've found their man strength already.
Yeah, and to that, there's another question from Alan who asks, how important is eyesight to your evaluation?
It's huge, but we, as an amateur scout, I've never been an amateur scout. In other words, I've never been a guy that scouts high school and college players. I believe they probably don't do this anymore. I don't even know, but they used to administer an eye test, which I always thought was funny. Like, go and play doctor in the kid's house when you can do a home visit. I don't get home visits of pro scouts. I'm not walking into Juan Soto's living room and talking to his mom.
Maybe you should, Kimball.
Yeah. So anyway, we just try and see how well a guy tracks the ball. You can sort of sometimes tell by their takes, by their reactions, but it's very difficult. But of course, we also have a ton of data to help us there. So eyesight is huge, but it's not like I certainly don't put it on my scouting report that a guy has 20/15 vision or anything like that.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And kind of really into that too, we had a question from Kyle McCarthy who asks, what tool do you see most often holds back top prospects from reaching their highest end outcome? Would you say it's that kind of plate discipline and their ability to really do what is necessary in an at-bat, or is there something else?
Well, I want to understand his question. Maybe I'll answer it two ways, because if he's saying it holds back top prospects,
right? As in like the last, like the skill that the tool that you feel isn't developed further enough that really says, oh, this guy's gonna be great, and then he doesn't really hit that potential. Is there something that is a common?
I think when we're talking about a hitter, I mean, well, I'll take from a hitter and a pitcher.
Sure.
It's that classic thing of, they have a style, they have an approach, they have a thing that works for them, and it gets them to certain levels, and they advance. But then there's that moment where you're like, hey, this guy really handles, the fastball in well, but he doesn't, handle off speed or take pitches the other way well. And you don't see him pitched well enough by good enough pitchers to tell, and you're trying to project if he can do it. And that's where it's like, the major leagues will tell if this guy can like make adjustments and cover up his holes and fix what's broken, and same thing for a pitcher, like he gets away, as Nick, with, hey, he blew him away with 2 pitches, although, now starters go 5 innings, 2 pitches, all you need, but he blew him away with 2 pitches. And now, is he really going to have that, like I remember Tanner Houck. You guys were talking about Tanner Houck when I was listening to the previous segment, and I had those very concerns when I would see him, and I had the Red Sox system when he was in the A-ball, I believe. And I was like, it's a good athlete, and I hear good things about his makeup. There's that low slot, and he doesn't really have a weapon for lefties, and what's going to happen, and is he? So it's you're guessing. Really develop that third pitch, that splitter, that neutralizer. And then you try and find out some guys that you thought had the aptitude to do it, don't, and vice versa. And so it's that ability to make the adjustment they need to make to play at the next level. That's the answer.
Yeah, and by the way, chat, keep the questions coming. I see them coming in. I think I'll be able to get to most of them, not all of them here. But I do remember actually sitting with you and talking about this a bit, and that area to develop, I think this is a very intriguing one. It's a conversation that you and I had about, do you think at his arm slot he could learn a blank, right? It's a good arm slot for a cutter or a changeup or whatever. And how much do you lean into that in your pitching analysis when trying to understand the future for these guys?
So I'll tell you a secret. I lean into it a lot.
Yeah.
but a lot of other scouts are like, you know. And I remember back when I was asking when I worked for the Blue Jays, and I was asking a front office guy, and I'm always trying to learn. I mean, that's part of why I'm here today, and that's why I like listening to PitchCon, and that's why I like going to speaking at the fantasy convention and hearing out the other speakers, because I'm always learning, and you know, that's what makes this game so great. But I've always been trying to figure out, like, when I started scouting and I could see, like, oh, this guy can't spin a breaking ball, and I'd say, well, isn't that partly how his arm works? I mean, it's a very restricted arm. It's not very loose. I don't know how he's going to spin it. And I remember asking a front office guy, you know, well, actually my boss at the time, a very veteran scout, and he was like, you know, I don't worry about that. Like, you see all kinds, and guys can do different things. I was like, I don't know. You know, maybe there might be one exception out there, but I think I see a trend, and so I often think, you know, I don't think a guy can do that with the way his arm works, and that is, you know, I hear it all the time. And it's where I like, you know, when I listen to, you know, analytics people or people trying to break this stuff down, and they say, like, oh, if he could only, you know, add a breaking ball. It's like, you don't think he's tried for the first 20 years of his life, 21 years of his life?
Yeah, right.
And his arm don't work that way. And so sometimes, you know, so I watch guys, and that's part of scouting, is I see how their arm works, and trying to tell people, like, fantasy players out there, to, you know, scout for yourself and get an edge, you know, like, wait, he can't do what he needs to do. I don't think his arm's going to allow him to do it. Again, it's too compact. It's too restricted, whatever reason. But that's where, like, again, a lot of people disagree and think it can happen. And the other thing I'll say, you know, since I mentioned compact arm action, is when I was learning how to scout in scout school 30 years ago, they talked about, like, you can't really change arm action. And that's been, you know, disproven.
Really?
I think it was more like, you know, you can't was more like, how, you know, dare you try? Because when a kid's thrown a ball for 25 years a certain way, you really think you're going to teach him to throw it a different way? Well,
Sure,
we've
yeah.
seen a lot of examples where that does work. And I think the
Right.
more it's happened, the more guys have tried to do it, seen it can work. You know, I mean, Joe Musgrove, I remember when I was with the Jays when he was a Jay early on, and he had a totally different way his arm worked. And then he changed his arm action, and so it can. Now, what's hard is it takes effort, repetition, you know, faith in what you're doing, you know, a good teacher perhaps. So it's not easy, but it can happen.
Yeah. Oh man. So this is great stuff, and guys, really good questions you're asking too. So here's one from Nate Kosher. He asks, how has the international market changed the scouting process?
Well, I think it's always been there. So I don't know if it's changed. I mean, not always been there, but in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
And I think what, you know, maybe I'll answer the question this way is, my boss, AJ Preller, when he was young and trying to get in baseball himself, he got himself early on to, you know, those Latin American countries and learned Spanish, and a lot of scouts realized, hey, that's one of the last few battlegrounds, because, you know, with the draft and with how often guys are scouted, there's very few secrets. So you're not going to go and find Mickey Mantle hiding in some small, you know, rural area. But in those places, there might still be some areas where you can do that. Now, I've never really, I've been to the Dominican and seen pro players, but I've never been part of that whole, you know, international market.
Right.
So it's still huge. I think that's why some people don't want there to be an international draft, because they kind of like that you can still beat the bushes down there and, you know, be creative. But it's a major part of the game. Obviously, there's so many great players that come from that market, especially now when, obviously, with all over the globe.
I mean, I don't quite understand why there isn't an international draft, honestly, but I'm sure I'm missing some obvious reason.
Well, as I said, I think a lot of people say, hey, those of us want to work it. We don't want it to be simple for other people that don't want to work it.
Sure.
So some teams So it's a philosophy. If some teams have a huge investment in it and lots of boots on the ground and academies, and they really believe in it, they don't want to give up that edge by saying, okay, now, anybody can just play and just, do sort of the lazy work and see the top guys and not make, mistakes or miss out on the big guys. And then,
Yeah.
of course, money comes into it so much, obviously, and how they're going to try and structure it. And obviously they've tried to limit teams spending there because they realized, the big market teams could really just crush it every time.
We have a really fun question from Knuckle Bear, and also affirmed by another commenter that they wanted to know the same thing. They ask, is there a Padre way to scout, or is it more of each scout brings their own strengths to the organization?
Well, yeah, no one's ever said like, hey, get along with the Padre way. But I think, we do have a way, and that is, and a lot of people know this already, but certainly baseball people know this. And one of the great things about working for the Padres is we're an organization that still believes in scouting. We still have one of the biggest scouting staffs in the business. And our boss is a huge believer in scouting. He's a big believer in analytics too. He's a great blender and smart guy, but he believes in the value of scouting, and he believes in the value of what you can find out by in-person scouting. And more every year when I'm out there, I'm like, there's fewer scouts doing what I'm doing because more teams are saying, hey, let's sit at home and watch video. Let's sit in the office and do it that way. We don't need that many bodies out there seeing guys. And I think it's an edge for us. I think it helps us be right more often when we do go acquire players. We're a little earlier on players. Everybody can say like, oh, just when a guy makes a change and he's all of a sudden starts doing well, you see the stats and you jump on it. Well, hopefully we can see that before the stats accumulate and have an edge on it. So the Padre way is to trust the eyes, along with everything else. And I'm really happy that obviously as a scout that works for them that we get to do that.
Yeah, and really, so I guess what I'm getting from that is just moving from these different organizations, did you see that certain ones had a different focus of how you should be scouting specifically? I mean, you don't have to go into the specifics of it. I imagine the Padres want to just like reveal their things that they find important and stuff. I get that.
In fact,
but is there something? Yeah.
I've often wanted more of that. Like I've tried to be the pain in the neck at meetings with every organization I've been to like, hey, don't you want us all to be a little more on the same page in terms of just our terminology?
Yeah.
Because it's funny, like, there's a lot of terms used in baseball for how guys do everything, throw the ball, hit the ball, whatever. What some people talk about arm action, like some people say like, oh, I call that blank and I call that,
right.
Stabber.
Just call him a Toby. That's fine.
I called it a jabber. And I'm like, if I were pro scouting director, I would say, hey, let's have a meeting where and people are going to be annoyed and bored that we're in the room for hours, but let's get it a little on the same page in our terminology. Because when I read a report, I want to know, oh, that's what he meant. But the other answer is, and most pro scouting directors will tell you like, oh my God, if everyone starts writing with all the same terminology and style, I'm going to be so bored reading reports. Like it's refreshing to read a different style of report. So there's a little pros and cons there, but the organizations I've been with, there's been, I remember, I'll tell you this, like when Perry Manassian took over, now the Angels GM took over as our pro scouting director in Toronto, he was very aggressive and probably as assertive as any pro scouting director I've had in being into our, like what he wants in that report. And he said, no, you've got every pitcher. I want you to at least make a comment on how he feels. It doesn't have to go into great detail, but I want you to touch that base. I don't want you to overlook that. And it was a very thorough process, and it was kind of good. It definitely made me a better scout because I had to say like, oh, okay, let's pay attention to something that I might kind of overlook with every single pitcher. You see it with a lot of guys, but some guys you just say like, he came in for one inning, I didn't really think about it, and now you're like, no, I got to think about it. And so that there was that, but most teams, scouts know what they're doing already, and they kind of get to the key parts of the report no matter what.
And really going into that even further, I remember actually asking you this in person once, and you did work it out for me, but I really want to hear it again. Of just, all right, here's a new pitcher. He's on the mound. What is the process that you go through when you're scouting? I remember you talking about the discovery of just the first couple pitches, you look at this thing. Then the next couple pitches, you look at this. What is that routine for you?
So this has kind of evolved for me over the years. And it's funny because when I was a writer and I wanted to work in baseball, but I didn't even think I could be a scout because I didn't play the game and I didn't think I really saw the things I need to see. And when I went to scout school, they're like trying to push you to like watch these things. And at first it was like, I can't watch 50 different things at once. Oh my God, I'm so confused.
Right.
And then luckily, like a lot of other guys there were confused too, guys that played high level, Major League Baseball and coached. And, I wasn't the only guy. And then over time, your brain just starts to filter and you just do things automatically. So I guess probably what I was saying to you at that time is, as soon as he starts jogging in, and so much of this game, as I try and talk to people like with basketball, if you went to a gym and you were playing pickup basketball, but you didn't know anybody, and they said, okay, you got ups, you're a winner, you pick your team, you would quickly try and assess the guys. And if you hadn't seen them play, you'd say like, well, this guy kind of looks a little slow and dumpy, and this guy looks like a hoss, and this guy looks, and you're sometimes wrong. The slow and dumpy guy isn't a phenomenal shooter and player, and the big hoss can't get out of his own way. Well, it's that way. So when they come to the mound, I'm like, what do we have here? Is this a beautiful piece of, body to work with? Is he long and athletic? Is he this? Is he that? And then now you're judging his body just by how he moves. Then he gets on the mound and he takes that first warm up, and right away, my eye kind of goes to his general delivery, but really it goes to that, how his hand goes from leaves his glove and comes through, and as he delivers the ball, his arm action is so huge. And with his action, you see his angle, then you start. And so it's just like, you see a lot of his delivery in his warm up, and you even see the pitches and what he's trying to throw. And then you've already formulated so much. And you're like, wow, this guy, he's a stiff, or this guy like is so graceful. He does it so easy. And you're seeing these things, but then that guy that does it so easy and graceful, all of a sudden he's pitching scared. He's afraid to throw a strike, and that stiff is like the toughest hombre you've ever seen. So they just start building on themselves, and the body of work just builds. And the more you see, the more you pick up on things and start looking for the subtleties of like, oh, he just doesn't know what he's doing, or he can't get an off-speed pitch over, behind in the count and things like that.
And for the hitter, what is it exactly that you're doing?
Well, it's very similar. I mean, I used to joke about like I like to see him come off the bus, and you kind of do that in spring training. You literally see teams arrive at a bus and walk to the training field, and right away you see like, well, there's a beautiful body. There's a guy that isn't just strong or quick or tall, but he moves well. It's graceful, which is so much of what being a good athlete is having, athleticism and grace. And then you see him, speaking of the hitter, you see him go into the plate, and ideally you can watch BP, but if you can't, hopefully watch on the side in the game. And you see his setup and how he stands and holds the bat and sets up to go into a swing, and what kind of stride he takes and how his balance is and how his body moves, and if he stays on the ball and just his swing path and length and how his hands work. And it just builds on itself. That again, the same thing that little dumpy guy you thought sucks goes in and has the best swing you've ever seen. And then get into game action, and oh my gosh, he has the greatest batting eye and feel and approach I've ever seen. And so the big, strong, beautiful looking guy, it can't even see the ball and is swinging at everything and can't make contact.
Sure. These are great answers, Kimball. And remember, everybody, we're doing this to raise money for ALS. We just got a $100 donation from Stephen Stoudington. Thank you so much, or Stoughton. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's a wonderful last name. So it's Play Ball from Sandlot as well. We're up to $8,700 raised, and we're trying to get to $10,000 by the end of today. We also have one more day of PitchCon. So go to pitchlist.com/PitchCon below to make your donation. 100% of everything we raise, not just proceeds, everything we raise goes to ALS One, a phenomenal organization helping those affected by ALS. So we have some more questions, of course. Thank you so much, chat. Keep leaving them here. We have one from Jason Collette. He says, Nick, since Nick loves knuckleballs, I don't know, can't trust a knuckleballer. Can another Matt Waldron come along, or is Waldron a unicorn and no scout would ever recommend a knuckleballer?
Well, you know, we see our own organization, and I remember when I saw Matt a few years ago for the first time, I thought he had the qualities it takes to be a good knuckleballer, even though he was barely throwing it then, because he knew how to pitch. He wasn't afraid of contact. He had a good body and delivery, and so he could just and it felt like he had the makeup, like to, you know, he was willing to try.
Right.
But I think what we've seen, of course, is it's so hard. You know, it's not easy to be a knuckleballer. And I think more and more teams, you know, I don't know why they don't. I've even written in reports, like with certain pitchers, that I see those qualities, and I feel like, you know, he doesn't have the fastball or the breaking pitches or a feel for the change, whatever, to do it. But I like his other aspects. And I've often said, like, let's try him as a knuckleballer. But I just, you know, the fewer there are, the harder it is to develop them, and the fewer people that have knowledge of it and can catch it and coach it. And so I still think it's a valuable weapon, you know, but I remember back when I was a writer, and I used to ask this, and I got Tim Wakefield came through Pawtucket before he had his comeback with the Red Sox, after, like, he flamed out with the Pirates. And I remember talking to him about it. And when he had gotten with the Negros and gotten great advice, one of the things they told him was, you know, you just have to accept that you're only going to be mediocre. He said, you just have to realize you're really just going to be a mediocre pitcher, which is better than a bad one. And I just think it's hard for guys to accept that. Now, it was funny because I refuted that because at the time, Wakefield, he was going great guns. Go look up the stats at Pawtucket that year. He was dominating. I said, but you're dominating right now.
Yeah.
So how's that going to work? Because he said so much of the mindset of his knuckleballer is just accept when things don't go right, and you know, and not like give up on what you're doing, and he had that quality. So I think there's that, you know.
Absolutely.
But I'm surprised there's not more knuckleballers out there.
Right. I could never do it. It was so bad. But
well, there you
Tim
go. See, Nick Pollack, you're long and lean, and there's no reason you can't still try.
I have too many things to do, like run PitchCon.
I'm too busy to be trying to make it Major League pitchers knuckleball.
Well, Kimball, come on, you can do it too. Nico did it too, older than you.
No, because I don't have that quality. You should see my arm action. It's so stiff.
Have you seen my arm action? You haven't.
No, I haven't.
There's no
but
video.
I have seen mine.
So you don't know.
I had video of I never really had video of myself playing tennis before, and then several years ago I saw it and I didn't realize how stiff my serving motion was. I just wanted to throw up.
Yeah, and also, you know, I have the body you're talking about, but you don't know. Maybe the small dumpy guy is better than my frame and everything, right? So you don't know.
You might need to do some lifting.
Yeah, I might. It's possible. No, these are great responses. I love this so much. In Wakefield, you know, props to him coming back from 2003 rather, against Aaron Boone. You got to be able to come back for that. And well, you know, they won the World Series the next year. Now, some more questions from Chad. We have some really good ones. G asks, do you think that the characteristics like a player's general curiosity and openness to change are important insofar as they might indicate how well they might be able to adapt? Are things like that thought of as part of a player's, quote, makeup?
Vital. And I feel like I've touched on this, but, people define makeup different ways, and it's, coincidentally, I think that's the biggest part of makeup, honestly. This is one of my personal beliefs, just I think makeup is accountability and the ability to, change, understand what you have to change and then address it. And, when I coach basketball, I mean, I'm telling you that it's huge.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes.
and in baseball, it's bigger than any sport I can imagine, because you're constantly having to make big or little adjustments to the game. It's a game of that. You don't have to adjust your box out style too much in basketball. You kind of have to learn it, and then you're probably okay. But in baseball, even a good hitter is like, I'm getting pitched differently. What I'm going to do, and so that is the biggest thing I look for in makeup and try and discern. And it's hard, because sometimes it involves finding out about the person, but also seeing how it plays out. Because some guys talk a good game, but then don't do it. Some guys couldn't, put words to what they're doing, but they do it naturally. Manny Ramirez.
Right.
So, it's huge, and again, that's why I think it's a big edge to be at the game and find out some information. And when we find out stuff, that's a big part of what I want to see, because I see a prospect like we talked about earlier, and I say he needs to learn to do blank, and I need to know, like, yeah, we've been telling him that for 6 years, and he still hasn't done it. And you see another guy, like I don't want to say a particular player, a high prospect that might be people forgetting about now. When I saw him play a couple of years ago, one of the things I bought in on was he made adjustments so quickly. I happened to watch this guy play at several levels that year and do well at all of them. And it was coincidental. I just happened to see him make his debut at a couple different levels, even though I didn't have that org. Another hint. And I was really impressed about how this young player made adjustments. And so I think I haven't seen him the last year or two, or last year, I should say, but I'm betting that he's going to make whatever adjustments he needs to make. And that's what we do. And that's why when we recommend a player, we say, like, he's going to be able to do it. He's going to be able to do it.
Yeah, Jackson Holliday is going to be great.
I didn't say that.
No, you didn't say that at all. I just made a guess completely. Did you just confirm what I was thinking? Oh, that's wonderful.
No, I said I didn't say that. That's
yeah, you didn't say that. I know you didn't. That was my guess. So that was literally my guess. If I got that right, that's like the only prospect I know. All right, we have G mentioning, yes, remember that reality show idea, Nick, trains at Driveline, wherever, to make it to the pros. Yes, I actually had that idea. Maybe I'll do that one fall or something like that. I'll just do a whole series about me actually going through what it's like to go through a pitching program. But no, I don't think I am able to do that anymore.
Did it right.
Oh my gosh, I'm too old for this. Market 8, dude. Oh man, good to see you, David. If players are being signed at 16 to 17 years old, and that's very young, how old or really young are they when they are seriously scouted?
Seriously scouted.
As in, like, 16, 17, that's not really.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I don't have that. I'm not doing the international market, but they're obviously being seriously scouted 12, 13, 14. So you have a feel for where they are 15, 16, 17. And even in the States, I think there's that. But
right. I mean, I think the question is really going more towards okay, we're getting them because we think there's a lot of potential. When is the expectation for them to really showcase the skill set that we hope that they develop into?
Well, I mean, what did we sign Ethan Salas at 16? So the expectation was there. Like, we gave him a ton of money. We had faith that he's going to be good. And I mean, the only way I'll answer that question, because I don't know if I can answer it any other way, is I get to see prospects when they're first signed and they come to the United States and like spring training, and it's amazing. It's you really have to respect the people that do that, because you'll see some scrawny little kid and you'll just be like, someone had faith that this was going to turn into a multi-million-dollar player. Wow. But you see some of the things we're talking about, like you hope that their frame fills out. You think it will. Most guys, obviously do. You never know if some guys won't do the work, but that's where makeup comes in. But you see the other skills and abilities, and you just project like anything else.
Yeah. All right. Here's a really fun one that I like. It's from Jim Caserta, who asks, "What is a game you remember seeing a high-level prospect that you tell stories about?" For him, it was Madison Bumgarner in 2006.
Well, um, I'll answer that two ways. I was fortunate. I think it was a little low on Madison Bumgarner. I saw him in the minor leagues, and I thought he'd be a good major league pitcher. I didn't think he'd be a stud.
Yeah.
And part of that, and I'm still trying to wrestle with what I missed, but his arm action kind of bothered me because it was so obvious.
Yeah, right?
You like talk
Cocked it
about
up.
there was
Yeah.
zero deception in my
Yeah.
book, and I've had this argument with other people. Like you could see his arm the whole way, and I was like, that's no deception. And then people would say, like, actually, that can be deceptive because this big long thing, and then you don't know if it's fastball changeup. Like, he doesn't have a changeup right now. He's double A. What? Like, I don't understand this. And I think I knocked him too hard for the deception and didn't realize how good his command was.
Mm.
And just because I really think that with Madison, I think that's probably underappreciated is just how well he located. And then the other thing is that was a competitor, obviously. Like, he had a lot of guts, and he did develop a changeup, but still I was like, I thought there was a limit to how good he could be with his lack of deception.
Sure.
But a game that, like, a guy that from day one, I happened to see Jose Reyes double A debut. And I mean, I was just like floored. You talk about when your first impression, like, first of all, I see this athlete and I go, I don't know if I can imagine a better athlete walking in front of me right now. He's got this explosive, strong, smooth body that just like looks he can do anything. And then I say, oh, and he's got a gun for an arm, and he's quick in the field, and he hits from both sides, and he's got a good swing, and he's got power, and feels like an approach. And I was just like, my jaw was dropping. And I think the only thing that was missing there, and I don't think Jose was a very good player, obviously, but to me, I thought he was just going to be amazing. And I think he never really, I don't know if he had the drive, the day-to-day drive, and, make up to be just like get the most out of his ability. He got a lot out of his ability. So I don't want to, knock him too much. He's still a very good player. But I can't imagine seeing a better prospect than that.
No, that's pretty good. And as far as a pitching prospect that you saw that really blew you away the second that you saw him, you're like, oh, okay.
Josh Beckett, man. Josh Beckett.
Really?
Oh my God. And I was lucky. I had Garrett Cole when he was in the Pirates system. I had him from day one when they drafted him, and coming up with a lot of other good arms. And I was just like, big, strong. It all works very clean. Great repertoire. Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's the guys that when they're that good, they're relatively easy to spot,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is there a certain mold too that you say, okay, cool. If I'm going to scout a pitcher right now, this is what I want their repertoire to be.
Well, I get accused of being, one day when I'm not scouting anymore and I'm the third voice on Rates and Barrels, I want to be the guy.
Not the Pitcher List podcast on Rates and Barrels. Okay, Kimball, I see how it is.
I like talking about hitters too,
Well, we have multiple podcasts.
Okay, fair enough. But because I always think about, I want to raise my voice sometimes, and Eno's a stuffist, and I'm like, I'm a commandist.
Yeah, well, hey, I've been helping with that. All right, I've been trying to pull that tug of war for you.
So and I've even debated this with my boss and other front office people, other scouts. I'm a sucker for good command. I'm just like, I just and part of it is just the aesthetic, just watching a guy carve and deal and place his pitches, and it's just so beautiful to me. And so I think and when a good command pitcher does well, I'm always like, aha, and glad that people that doubted that in him, his ability to just overcome a lack of stuff. So it's command. It's just the ability to like that touch and feel and locate. I just love that.
Sure. Is there inside of that though, just as far as like the pitches that they throw, are you hoping it's command with
Well, I
changeup? Is it command
yeah,
with sinker
you
or more
know,
than four
again,
seamer?
the breaking ball era, obviously it's a huge weapon, but
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for great change. I love that fastball change combo, and I just love that.
Yeah, for me, it's I mean, first and foremost, you talking about hey, command. This is actually what I think is the greatest gap that in-person scouts can fill is really understanding the moment-to-moment command and saying, cool, he threw this because he saw this, and he put it where he wanted to, instead of just using control, instead of just saying, oh, generally we like this location due to our model. You can actually say, well, no, his changeup feel is very, very good in the way he uses it, the situations he pulls it out, he's able to locate that as he wants to. That is, I think, the hardest thing for all of us over here behind our boxes are trying to quantify as best as we can. And I would imagine scouts have that leg up. So it's no surprise to me that you're like banging the drum on command as much as you can.
Yeah, and I still, when I scout a game, not every scout does this. In fact, probably very few do. But I go pitch by pitch and write the result of each pitch, and I like to think I'm in the head of the pitcher a little bit, especially if I know the opposing team and how I
Yeah.
would pitch them. And it's a big part of my evaluation process. I think that I get a feel for like, ooh, what he did there, what he did there, and when I find that I'm not keeping pitch by pitch, I just kind of space out, and I don't really have the same locked in vibe.
Sure. No, I get that. Actually does remind me about about you teaching me scout etiquette of things like, okay, cool, Nick, do not get up until it's happening. For the love of God, don't do this. Is there a couple other are there a couple other scout etiquette things that you should
Well,
let
that's
people know
fan etiquette. That's the announcement I want.
about?
That's the announcement I want made at every ballpark. It's like
Um,
there's about 18 natural breaks in every game, fellas. So don't you dare stand up during an inning. If you're gonna move, get up after an inning is over. And it just boggles my mind. And I personally feel it's the opposite in baseball now because when the game's played, it's slow, it's quiet, and people get bored and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go get something to drink. But then between innings, when they put on all this music and stuff, they think something's happening, and so they stay in their seats, and it drives me crazy. I haven't gotten to an altercation with the fan yet,
Yet.
but I do want that announcement. It makes no sense to me in a game with all these breaks that people would get up during that. But there's lots of scout etiquette, and we we like to talk during games, but we kind of know when we can and we can't, like when we're bearing down, and we also know there's a point where it's like, okay, I'm watching with a softer focus now, and so there's that moment.
All right, there you go. And really going back to the previous one a bit, something that I've talked about, and I know that one of the biggest gaps that you and I have on player assessment is just I only care about a certain level of quality. And you're like, Nick, that's a good number 5 or something for a depth piece somewhere. I'm like, that's great. That's nice. I don't care. But I think really talking about that top layer, right? The top level of what they can be. I personally, when I look at prospects, I say, great. If you're a lefty, this is a change-up focused league for lefties right now. You have to be able to have a great change-up. If you don't have one as a lefty, then there has to be something that's just overpowering with your four-seamer. Because otherwise, it's just you're not going to have that pitch against right-handers as often. Maybe it's a slider down and in, but then the fastball, if it's not overpowering, then it's kind of not enough. If it's a right-hander, four-seamer has to be great, or it has to be the most deadly slider ever. Otherwise, I feel that there's going to be always chasing something else. I mean, that's just the most rudimentary, like basic of what I'm looking for. Are there certain things that you are seeing of qualities in? I know I'm focusing a lot on pitching. What do you know? That's me. Of prospect pitchers in particular, because every year, really, there's only a handful that really blow up the scene and be like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. Are there certain things that you're highlighting, saying like he is MLB ready and can dominate now, that you see as a constant attribute?
Well, I think with pitchers, it's easier to decide if they're ready because you just see their weapons and their stuff and how they use it, and you'd say, well, that breaking ball is going to play at any level, as
Well,
opposed to a
that's
guy,
what I'm getting at,
right?
right? Is
Or
yeah.
that, or his usage of his fastball is going to play at any level, um, and you see that, and then sometimes you're trying to project, like you say, like, okay, um, with the way he when we I went to see Marcus Stroman. I was with the Jays, and we were having trouble with pitching, and we were like, all right, we might have to go down deep to our Double-A team, and these youngsters that just came up to Double-A, and if they're ready, and so they sent me to see Stroman and help evaluate if I thought he could pitch in the major leagues. And I had heard a little bit about Stroman, this short guy from Duke, terrible school, and I went to UNC, and so I went to see Stroman, and I thought with how smooth he did everything and his actions and how well it all worked, I was like, you could promote him because even if he
Right.
doesn't have the change he needs now, he can learn it on the fly. He won't, he'll adapt. He can use his breaking ball more or less. He can change the shape of it. He can do this. He can do that. He can even throw with more effort if he had to. He can bump up his velocity. So I saw a guy that can make adjustments. Because of his physical and mental and raw abilities. And so that's usually what with pitchers. Sometimes you are looking at a power guy that doesn't use his changeup, and you just have to guess, will he really trust it? Will he use it? Even if we talk about he has the arm action and hand feel to use a changeup or throw a changeup, but he can't find the time to use it in this game against these hitters. So I just have to hope that he can use it and trust it in a major league game. But yeah, I think you can usually do that. But instead, I'm going to use your question to pivot like a good politician and say, if you're in a league where you can just pick up starters left and right and drop them left and right, you're not in a realistic league. Major league teams can't do that. We can't just stream our starters. We got to say, bang, you're in the rotation and we don't have other options, and we can't just go and get this guy. So
Don't
get
yuck
in a
my yum.
tighter league. Get in
Don't
a
be a
tighter league.
gatekeeper.
What?
Don't be a gatekeeper. Let's have our fun.
Well,
All right.
no, you can have your fun, but you know what you can't do? You can't criticize major league teams anymore. For like, that's part of why people got in fantasy, was because, like, I don't get to be a GM. I don't get to make the decisions that Frank
Sure.
Cashin's making. I would never keep that guy over this guy. Well, it's easy when you can just ditch this guy, but in major leagues, like, you want to give up on, Randy Vasquez. Well, you don't just get to go and pick Philadelphia's third starter and throw him in there. You got to go to your minor league system and call up your Double-A guy that's getting beat up
Yeah.
in San Antonio.
I mean, there are some times that we certainly see a guy of high quality who's there, and then we see them throwing this guy out there every 5 days. It's just, this can't work. This is not the opportunity. But Kimball, I'm happy you're telling us how you really feel. Finally, you've been holding back.
It's my chance to express this in this forum.
I mean, I've certainly been like, hey, Randy Vasquez, I can see how this works. I totally get this. I see how it would work with Brito as well. I'd see how it works with a lot of the Padres guys.
That was not the point of my answer.
And Adrian Morejon, I think there's some fun stuff there. Obviously, he's not healthy enough to really be extended and stretched and relied upon. But I think there's a lot of fun stuff there. I mean, I think we're kind of on the same page, though, of just saying, great, these are the elements to look for. And I'm going to ask one more question as we have the turn of the air, but I want to give you just a little bit more time because, Kimball, it's just great hanging with you. We don't get to do this very often anymore. There's a really good one, I think, from G, who asks, are you aware of any discussions on whether certain cricket skills might transfer well to baseball?
I'm not necessarily aware of that, but it's funny that when so I was a writer before I became a scout, and I'm trying to think of the circumstance because I was still writing some. I think maybe I was a full-time scout, but I was asked to do some off-season coverage of some other stuff. I don't think I was still writing full-time then. And
Mhm.
I live in Rhode Island. I went to cover the Newport Invitational high-level professional tennis tournament right after Wimbledon, the week after Wimbledon. And there's a lot of great players there. And and I remember really being obsessed with scouting and how things work. And I wanted to take some guys with great serves and turn them into pitchers, because I said, like, that arm's got,
Right.
like,
Yeah. Right.
that's got to work, man. Like, he's serving it at 150. He's got to be able to throw it 95. So I mean, I thought about that. I think I'm not positive, but I scouted the Indian players, the players from India that the Pirates signed, and gosh, did I even see the movie? They were cricket players. At least one of them wasn't he? Like, before, maybe you don't know about this, but the Pirates signed a couple, and they made it. John Hamm was in the movie $1 Million Arm, was it? I
Oh
don't know.
yeah. Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they were cricket players, but you would think, but isn't uh, I don't even know that much about cricket, but you have to deliver with a stiff arm, right? Or
Mhm.
stiff wrist,
Yeah.
right?
You
That's the
can't.
whole
You
point.
have to go through. You can't turn it over. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's different.
so that might or might not translate. Maybe say, like, wow, when he starts using his whole arm, he's going to be really
Right.
good. Or it's like, no,
Right.
that's not how you throw a baseball really effectively.
Well, Kimball Crossley, thank you so much, not only for sharing your time, but sharing your insights on the industry. Incredibly interesting, and yeah, just a great time with you, man. So thanks
Hey,
so much for being part
my
of PitchCon.
pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Nick.
Yeah, it's again, it's been too long. I won't be in Florida, so for spring training or anything, so it's gonna be a little bit till I get to see you again, unfortunately.
All right.
But just let me know when you're in town. Just let me know.
Super
We'll
cool.
find a game. We'll go to
All
it.
right. Sounds good.
All right, Kimball Crossley, everyone. Just give him a big round of applause inside of the chat, and all of his thanks for answering our questions. But Kimball, we'll talk soon. Great to see you.
All right. Thank you.